I think that we as jazz guitarists often we tend to dismiss the pentatonic scale because we think, well, I know that because that's one of the first things probably that we learn on this instrument. So we think like, okay, I'm done with that. But in this lesson, I want to take a little bit of a closer look, dig a little bit deeper into the subject of the pentatonic scale. The scale that I'm talking about is the normal pentatonic scale that we mostly use, so major pentatonic or minor pentatonic, same thing, or the same notes. There are, of course, other pentatonic scales, and I might touch a little bit on that later on in the video, but I just want to look at this scale a little bit more closely and see how can we practice these scales and what are some things we need to consider. It seems to me like you can find this scale in almost every culture. There is a famous video with Bobby McFerrin where he kind of makes the audience, I think it's a TED Talk or something, he makes the audience sing the next note of the scale in a very entertaining way without instructing them to what scale it is, and prove the point that we have this system seems to be ingrained within us. I don't know if it's culturally or maybe this scale has some kind of pleasing quality to it that makes every culture use this scale and like this scale. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the overtone series. Another funny thing is that the guitar, the standard tuning is an E minor or G major pentatonic scale, right? So we're actually tuned in a pentatonic scale. Okay, so let's get started. Let's look at a G major pentatonic scale. What I want to do is we want to make sure that we know this scale all over the fretboard. So if we play it like this, and then go to the next position, play it descending, and then I go. Then we've gone through all the positions. So you want to grab your guitar for this one. So 3, 4. What are we actually doing? Well, we're playing this scale, the same scale, with different locations on the guitar, but it's the same scale. And we're using 2 notes per string, which is the most common. You could find other combinations. I think Frank Gambale plays them sometimes like 3, 1. So 3 notes on one string and then 1 note. Which enables him to do the sweeps. But I don't do that. But it's always good to kind of go outside of your normal comfort zone. Sometimes people talk about double pentatonics where you play 2 right next to each other. Like that. It's a kind of I guess a good technique exercise, but I tend not to do that kind of stuff. But we're also shifting position here and here. So there are 3 ways you can move around, or maybe 4. There's a new way that I figured out with a little bit of Kurt Rosenwinkel magic. The first is just to do a position shift. Meaning I just shift my hand to the next position. So if I were to play this as a classical proper, I'm actually in 2nd position, right? And then then I'm jumping to the 4th position, or 3rd, or sorry, 5th. I guess that's the 5th position. But I tend to kind of do that kind of stuff. I don't play like that. You could also do that as a slide. It's pretty much the same thing. There, I just slid the finger up. But we don't want to get confused the slide as an effect or using slide as a position shift. If I do as a position shift, I'm just... It doesn't sound different, it's just that I'm moving my finger without lifting it. But if I do a slide as an effect, we put it more like that. If I want to make a bigger position shift, the way classical guitar players do that is here I'm gonna shift to the 7th position. I want to be aware of which finger I'm gonna use, so I'm gonna use the pinky. So I look at the fret I'm going to, the 10th fret, but I'm in my awareness, I'm thinking about the pinky. That's how I've seen instructors, classical guitar instructors explain like larger position shifts or bigger position shifts. You could also use a stretch to get to the next position. I don't find that as useful, but you could do that. You could also shift position on another string as an exercise. So if I shift position on the 2nd string, or the 3rd or any string. So that's a good exercise if you've never done that. The 4th way is something I saw. Kurt Rosenwinkel has recently, I think, started to release videos, like short instructional videos that are kind of linked to his website where you can buy the whole lesson, I think. It's from Hardcore is the name of the YouTube channel, which I think is his record label, where he does this thing called a snake. So I'm going to link to that so you can check it out. But basically the idea is to play a note with different fingers. I'm not doing a good job there, but without making it sound like you're changing finger. He does it with all the fingers. So if I can shift fingers without sounding like I'm shifting fingers, you know what I mean? Then all of a sudden, that might seem like ridiculous, but all of a sudden I have more fingers available, because if I play the scale like this, now I'm kind of stuck. Well, I have the pinky, but I'm kind of stuck here. But if I can change to another finger without letting go of the note, well, all of a sudden I have more fingers in front of me. So we're gonna try to do that.
You play a note and you put all of your fingers, you slide your fingers behind the note. So the note's still ringing. So you can be playing a line.
So I'm gonna play that A twice. And then the B twice, but I'm gonna use a different finger for it. So I'm gonna use the Muse score here. It sounds a little bit silly, but it's good for what it is. So I'm basically repeating the top note. One time with the finger from the first fingering, and the second time with the finger from the next fingering. Now try to do that without making the notes sound like two notes. This is kind of tricky. So you can check out that video and see how he does it. It looks really cool. He's got some other very interesting short videos that you can check out, and he has a kind of a interesting sense of humor.
Oh, we got the pigeon. Yeah.
Second degree melodic.
Not sure what's going on there, but okay. So you, of course, should do this with all the pentatonic scales in every key. So let's just do one more. Let's do G minor for good measure. 3, 4. Now we're gonna add some things to this. So of course you should know what the notes are when you're playing them. I saw a video recently where somebody said you don't need to know what the notes are you're playing. Of course you need to know what the notes are you're playing. But are you always thinking about it? No. It's like talking. Like I know what letters I'm using and what words I'm using, but I'm not thinking about them, right? It's second nature. But I know what the notes are here, of course, F, G, B flat, C, D. But I'm not necessarily thinking about that. When you're playing, instinct takes over. I also know what the scale degrees are, right? Root, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1. So if you're struggling with that, because this is one of the problems with the guitar, which I always come back to this topic, the shapes. We learn shapes and then we don't know what we're playing. It's not all bad. Shapes are good and useful and helpful. We need to see these shapes for what they are. And it's like a combination of things, right? When you're learning this, you're visually learning the scales, and orally you're hearing them, hopefully, and you're intellectually knowing what the notes are and the scale degrees. And also it's a muscle memory things. All those things combined will help you get to the point where you can do this all effortlessly. So if you're struggling with what the note names are, say them out loud. And even better, use a different instrument. If you're lucky enough to play another instrument, that's gonna help. Play the piano. If you can't play the piano at all, you really need to learn to do that. It's because all this theory stuff is much more laid out better on the piano, so you really see how things work. And then you can play them on the piano and then visualize that you're doing it on the guitar. So here's some other things you could do to help you with that. You could change a note, and then we get into the other scales that we sometimes use. You could also do this. This is something I stole from a video with Guthrie Govan. Is it Guthrie Govan or Guthrie Govan? Not sure what the correct pronunciation is. Where he talks about smear bends. He calls them microtonal bends. I've heard people call them smear bends. So we're gonna do a little bend.
That flavor. If you let it back down again, and that's what your fretting hand wants to do, it wants to bend and then release, you lose a lot of the impact. It's got to be.
It's not even it's just like a inflection of the minor third and the flat 7. because then you really need to know where those notes are. So he explains really well in this video how this bend should be properly done. But something like this. Here, here. So it's just a little inflection of the note, make it sound more alive. And this is something we can do on this instrument. So, but we don't necessarily think too much about that. It's just something that usually happens naturally. We just start doing that. But it's good to think about these things in kind of in detail, exactly what we're doing. Then you can add notes, right? So the most common thing is to add the blues note, the sharp 4 or flat 5. Again, I'm gonna play along with my music score here. You could also add the 9th, so the A. So I'm just adding the A to all the position. So it gives you a hexatonic scale, but it forces you to think about where that note is and where the scale degrees are. There are, of course, other pentatonic scales. I mean, technically, it could be any 5-note scale. I know, for example, I think it's like Japanese music, they use different pentatonic scales that I think are because of how the nature of the flute. And I think McCoy Tyner was experimenting with those kinds of sounds. But this is not really the topic of this lesson, but I want to look at maybe a few of those because you could just alter one of the notes. So if I take the G major, again, if I drop the 6, I get a major flat 6 scale, pentatonic scale. And I have talked about that scale in previous videos, which I will link to. The best book for that kind of stuff is a book that I've also talked about, Jerry Bergonzi, Pentatonics. He covers all of those kind of hybrid pentatonic scales that we can use in jazz. And also this book that I've also covered, and I will link to that one as well, Pentatonic Concepts by Steve Kahn, where he talks about the normal pentatonic scale and one more, I think. It's important to remember that these pentatonic scales work over different chords. So the G major doesn't just work over a G major chord, right? It can be derived from G major or C major or D major. So it will work over a bunch of chords. It could also work over any chord from the D melodic minor, because you can find this scale in D melodic minor. So that means that, for example, C sharp altered, G major pentatonic works. But these kind of hybrid pentatonics where you change a note works even better, I think, because they can outline that sound better. So if I, for example, play a B altered, the G major, flat 6, outlines that chord really nicely. So therefore it's useful, but I don't really find myself thinking too much about that scale, but just practicing it helps you explore that sound in ways that you may have not done before. So it's a good thing to work on those scales. Another one could be change the D to a C sharp. That's another nice one, which Steve Collin talks about in this book. And that's a very common sound as well. But for now, what I mean is that you compare the scale with the normal. Because then you have to think about, well, if I'm changing the D to the C sharp, I need to know where that D is in every position. So that's why I think it's good to practice like that. So it's important to separate like the idea of playing blues and these pentatonic scales. So I'm not necessarily talking about blues, because that's kind of its own thing. We're just learning pentatonics the way, you know, maybe John Coltrane would play pentatonics, or McCoy Tyner. That's a completely different thing than what Stevie Ray Vaughan was doing. Stevie Ray Vaughan was, in my opinion, almost playing a different, that's almost like a different instrument, the way he plays. So what we're doing here is not that, even though these things kind of overlap. There's another scale that I've seen people call the soul scale. I recently discovered that term from a YouTube channel, which is very good. That would also, I will link to, I think it's called Jazz Duets or Jazz Duets, where he talks about the soul scale. And first I was skeptical, like every time I hear a scale label like that, as if a music style is based on a scale. But then again, we say the blues scale. So what it is like if you're playing G major, but you change the A to a A sharp, but I think of that as a B flat. Then I get that, right? I like to put them next to each other. So it's the same scale as before, but I play B flat instead of A. And now on the way down, descending, it sounds better if I play the B flat before the B natural. So if I do that, I get this. The soul scale. But it makes sense, right? You know that sound. I never thought about that stuff as a scale before. I was just thinking it's just like mixing. That kind of stuff. It's just mixing, combining different blues flavors. I got a lot of that stuff from George Benson. So I studied George Benson a lot. Like I tried to figure out what he was doing. And then this kind of... But let's go through all these positions. But I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to play the B natural, the B flat instead of A. And then I'm going to play that before the B every time and see what that sounds like. Shall we? The tune to study, if you want to look deeper into this sound, is a tune called Sister Sadie. Sister Sadie, I hope that's the correct pronunciation. Horace Silver, it's this tune, right? That's the soul scale. One more thing I want to leave you with is how I like to play these scales. So play them as double stops. Take the G major. You get this cool kind of African sounding. I really like that sound. And then if you can do that, I use a combination of barring and sometimes I play with different fingers. You play them like this. This is from the Jerry Bergonzi book. So you get a third, and then all the other intervals are fourths. So this kind of opens the door to the quartal playing of like McCoy Tyner-ish. Or up like the opposite. And what I really like to do is one alternating, like one up and one down. Going through the positions. This is really good if you're practicing with the flat 6, for example. Now I'm starting to have to really think about what I'm doing. So that could be a B alter thing, right? Or it could be F. It's almost like a whole new sound. So that kind of opens the door for kind of like modal. What they do then is they take another pentatonic scale that is outside and then you can weave in and out of that. So I could do E minor and I guess you could do B flat minor. It's called Pentatonics. And that's the last chapter of the Jerry Bergonzi book, I think. And I've seen a lot of people talk about that, kind of using different pentatonics to kind of go in and outside of the tonality. But that's a little bit of a different topic than I wanted to talk about today. Today, I just wanted this full workout of the pentatonic scale. So this stuff is on my Patreon page. If you want to look more at this pentatonic stuff, I have videos on the major flat 6 pentatonic and the minor flat 5 pentatonic, and so there is plenty of more. I'll link to all these videos that I have so you can check that out if you want to study this even more. But hopefully you learned something new about the pentatonic scale that maybe perhaps you didn't know before, and if you did, please let me know in the comments. And if you want to support my work, you can become a subscriber on Patreon. You get access to the PDFs to lessons where I have that, and sometimes I make bonus videos and I make Q&A sessions on every first Sunday of the month via Zoom. So with all this stuff, as always, a big thank you and Thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.